I became a billionaire tech CEO after my family abandoned me. Now they're furious I'm funding the homeless shelter where they laughed at me living. Hi everyone. Before we dive in, show some love by subscribing and commenting where in the world you're joining us from. Alright, let's get back to the story. I remember the exact date I stopped believing in mercy. March 15, 2008. I was wearing the same clothes for 3 consecutive days, and my mother had just walked past me sleeping on a bench outside the shelter like I was invisible. That's not metaphorical. She literally stepped over my feet without acknowledging my existence. My name is Julie Richardson and I'm sitting here typing this at 4 a.m. in my penthouse, tears streaming down my face, still processing how someone who birthed you can pretend you don't exist. But that moment became my fuel. I wasn't always invisible. 3 years earlier I'd been the golden child. Graduating from engineering school with honors, landing an entry-level position at a mid-sized tech firm, working 80-hour weeks to prove something to everyone around me. My brother Derek worked at my father's construction company, making triple my salary while doing half the work. The favoritism was suffocating, but I never complained. I just worked harder. Then everything collapsed. My ex-husband Ryan, God, I can still hear his voice. He cheated, stole $40,000 from our joint account, and disappeared to another state with his new girlfriend. I couldn't afford our apartment alone. My parents said it was my poor judgment in picking a husband, not their problem. My in-laws stopped answering my calls. Derek actually laughed when I asked for a temporary loan. Within 8 months I'd lost everything. My car got repossessed. I couldn't pay rent. My company downsized and let me go during the recession. I became the family's cautionary tale, their proof that I'd never been smart enough for the big leagues. When I showed up at family dinners still trying to salvage relationships, my mother would shake her head and say, "You've always been so reckless, Julie. What did you expect? That shelter?" That became my address when I had nowhere else to go. The breaking point wasn't gradual. It was violent and specific, crystallized in a single conversation that rewired my entire existence. I'd been at the shelter for 6 months when my younger sister Keisha, only 19 at the time, volunteered there for her college community service requirement. I was terrified she'd see me, and she did. Instead of acknowledging me or offering help, she literally told me, with her sorority sisters standing nearby, that if I was still struggling this badly, maybe I deserved to be here. Her exact words were, "Sometimes people just aren't built for success, and that's okay. Not everyone can be winners." I felt something shatter inside my chest. Not break. Shatter. That same week I overheard Derek telling a friend on his cell phone, "My sister's basically homeless now. It's pathetic. She always had this delusion she'd be some tech mogul. Now look at her, cleaning bathrooms at a shelter to afford meals." Then he laughed. He actually laughed. His friend joined in. I was standing 3 feet away pretending to mop. The rage I felt wasn't hot. It was cold. Calculated. I remember going to my cot that night and making a decision that changed everything. I would build an empire not to impress them, but to survive without ever needing them again. And one day they would know exactly what they'd discarded. The shelter's director, Mrs. Anderson, was the only human who treated me like I had potential. She was a 68-year-old black woman who'd fought poverty her entire life, and she saw something in me everyone else had missed. She encouraged me to start rebuilding. She let me use the shelter's computers during off hours. She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. "Baby, hurt people," she told me one night, smoking a cigarette on the shelter's back porch. "But you're not hurt people. You're going to be someone who heals them. I can see it." I cried that night, not from the pain they caused but from the simple act of someone believing I had worth. That's when I decided, I'd get my life together. I'd build something extraordinary. And when my family came asking, I'd make sure they understood the value of what they'd thrown away. Getting my first apartment took everything I had. I worked 3 jobs. Cleaning houses during the day, shelving books at the library at night, and cleaning the shelter on weekends. Mrs. Anderson let me stay at the shelter rent-free during this time, which saved my life literally and emotionally. The breakthrough came through an unexpected friendship. Among the shelter residents was an older man named Robert Green, a former software engineer who'd lost everything to addiction. Robert was intelligent, broken, and still sharp underneath all the trauma. We started talking during meal prep, and I told him about my background in engineering, my dreams of working in tech, and my fear that I'd already lost my window of opportunity. Robert listened carefully. Then he told me something that changed my trajectory. You don't need permission to rebuild, Julie. You need a skill they can't ignore. He offered to mentor me in coding. Not basic coding, deep, sophisticated programming in Python and C++. He had nothing to teach with but his knowledge and the shelter's outdated computers, but his mentorship was worth more than any university degree. For 6 months we worked together every single evening. He pushed me past comfort, corrected my mistakes ruthlessly, and believed I could master systems that seemed impossibly complex. Meanwhile, my family lived their lives completely unaware. They didn't know I was educating myself back into relevance. My mother ran into me at a grocery store once, and instead of asking how I was, she asked if I'd found a nice job. Yet, her way of confirming I was still a disappointment. I just smiled and kept walking. The truth? I was building something she couldn't comprehend. After 8 months of intensive learning, I created a small but elegant code solution for inventory management. I refined it, tested it obsessively, and finally submitted it to 3 small tech companies that were struggling with outdated systems. One company called back immediately. They offered me a contract gig to customize the system specifically for their needs. The payment? $8,000. I cried when I received that first check. Not because it was a fortune, but because it proved I was worth something again. That someone somewhere saw value in what I could create. That $8,000 was my launching pad. I used half to secure a tiny studio apartment in a less expensive neighborhood, and invested the other half in legitimizing my presence in the tech world. I got my old certification updated, joined online communities, and started taking freelance coding jobs. Within a year, I was making $60,000 annually through contract work. It wasn't impressive, but it felt like resurrection. The worst part? My family still didn't know. My father bumped into me at a coffee shop once, and instead of greeting me properly, he gave me that look. The one that said, "I still don't believe in you." I was about to tell him about my progress, but something stopped me. He didn't deserve to be part of my story anymore. That's when Derek made his biggest mistake. Derek decided to start his own construction company with money our parents had gifted him. About $250,000 in capital with 0 strings attached. He threw a party celebrating his entrepreneurial vision. The entire family attended. I wasn't invited, but I heard about it through mutual acquaintances. Derek was leveraging the family name, the family money, and the family connections, all things I had fought for desperately on my own. I remember sitting in my studio apartment looking at my bank statement showing $67,000 in savings, earned entirely through my own work, and feeling something shift inside me. Not anger. Clarity. Derek had every advantage and was still choosing mediocrity. I had nothing and was building something real. Then my mother called, the first contact in almost 2 years, to ask if I could lend her $5,000. She was embarrassed to ask, she said. My parents' business was struggling. Could I help? I almost laughed. Instead I said, "No, Mom. I can't. I'm sorry you're struggling, but I'm rebuilding my own life." She called me selfish. Ungrateful. She reminded me that I was only alive because of her. The words should have hurt, but they didn't. They just confirmed what I'd already understood. My family loved the idea of me more than they loved me. 3 months later, I got recruited by a major tech company. They'd seen my portfolio, been impressed by my problem-solving approach, and wanted me to lead a development team. The salary was $150,000 plus equity. I accepted without telling a single family member. 5 years of relentless work transformed me into someone I barely recognized. I wasn't just an employee anymore. I was an innovator. I developed a revolutionary data compression algorithm that reduced server costs by 40% industry-wide. The company made billions. I made millions. By 32, I'd secured my first $50 million through stock options and smart investments. By 35, I'd founded my own company, Adaptive Systems for Growing Businesses. By 37, I went public, and suddenly I wasn't just wealthy, I was legendary. Forbes featured me. TechCrunch ran a piece about my rise. I became the black female founder everyone wanted to meet, the underdog success story that proved anything was possible with enough determination. That's when my family remembered I existed. My mother called first. Not to apologize. To ask for investment in her new catering business idea. My father had a business proposition, real estate development that required someone with capital and connections. Derek wanted to reconnect and needed advice on scaling his company. Keisha asked if I could sponsor her wedding. My ex-husband Ryan, yes, the same Ryan who'd stolen from me and abandoned me, reached out through LinkedIn with a "let's catch up" message that made my stomach turn. They hadn't believed in me. They'd mocked me. They'd forgotten me. And now they wanted access to what I'd built from nothing. I ignored them all initially. But then I did something unexpected. I started investigating where they were financially. Derek's business was barely profitable and deeply in debt. My parents had only $80,000 in retirement savings despite my father being 61. The family that had abandoned me was falling apart, and a small part of me, a part I'm not proud of, felt satisfied by that knowledge. That satisfaction bothered me. It meant I hadn't truly healed yet. That money, success, and vindication were still tied to their suffering in my mind. Mrs. Anderson's voice came back to me. You're going to be someone who heals people, not hurts them. So I made a decision that my therapist would later call incredibly generous, and my lawyer would call absolutely insane. I decided to establish a charitable foundation specifically focused on homeless services and economic mobility programs. It would be funded by 10% of my annual earnings, millions every single year, dedicated to helping people exactly like the person I used to be. The foundation would be headquartered at the shelter where I'd lived. The place my family had forgotten me. The shelter where they would eventually see what they'd created. I renovated that shelter using $40 million. Not the gritty, depressing structure I'd known, but a state-of-the-art facility with private rooms, job training centers, mental health services, dental clinics, and educational programs. I named the main building after Mrs. Anderson, who'd passed away 3 years earlier but had lived long enough to know I'd escaped. The grand opening was magnificent. Local politicians attended. News crews filmed the ribbon-cutting ceremony. I stood there in a Chanel suit accepting accolades for my philanthropic commitment to underserved communities, and nobody, absolutely nobody, knew that I was cutting the ribbon on the place where I used to sleep on a cot dreaming of escape. Mrs. Anderson's daughter attended the ceremony. When she saw my name on the building placard, she cried. She told me that her mother had talked about me constantly before she died, telling everyone I had a special destiny, that I'd change the world for people like us. I finally understood forgiveness that day. The foundation launched programming aimed at tech industry training, specifically targeting homeless and low-income populations. We partnered with major tech companies to hire graduates. We provided housing assistance and mental health support and financial literacy training. We gave people the tools and the belief in themselves that nobody had given me. Within 2 years, we'd helped over 3,000 people transition out of homelessness. The success rate was unprecedented. That's when my family discovered what I'd done. My brother Derek was driving through the neighborhood. Apparently he was now consulting on a construction project nearby, and he literally drove past the renovated shelter. He read the signage, saw my name. He called my father immediately. Julie's got money, Derek told him. Serious money. She's funding this massive homeless center. She's rich. The family group chat exploded. Within hours they were all texting and calling. My mother was so proud, suddenly remembering that she always knew I'd be successful. My father wanted to reconcile and catch up, suggesting expensive restaurants where we could celebrate my achievements. Derek wanted to partner on something, his language suddenly respectful and strategic. Keisha sent a text that made me actually lose my breath. OMG sis. I knew you were special. I'm so sorry I was mean to you in college. Can we talk? I miss you. Also, is there any way you could help me with my student loans? I'm so stressed about them. Not an apology. A demand wrapped in nostalgia. I didn't respond to any of them. But Mrs. Anderson's daughter, her name was Simone, suggested something that made my blood run cold. Julie, you know they'll show up eventually. At the shelter, at your office, at events. They'll keep pushing until you either help them or confront them directly. He was right. And I wasn't ready for that confrontation yet. It happened on a Tuesday during a foundation charity gala at the downtown convention center. 300 of the city's most influential people were attending. Tech CEOs, philanthropists, city officials, and media personalities. I was at the podium discussing my next initiative, a housing voucher program that would help 5,000 additional people. That's when my parents walked in. I saw them before they saw me. My father looked older, frielier. My mother had that same pointed face, but exhaustion had aged her significantly. They were scanning the crowd, clearly looking for me. And when their eyes locked with mine, I saw the moment they processed that I was the woman on the stage, the billionaire they'd dismissed. My father's jaw dropped. My mother actually gasped. I continued my speech without losing my composure, but inside I was crumbling. Every abandoned Christmas, every dismissive comment, every moment they'd pretended I didn't exist came rushing back. After the speech, they pushed through the crowd toward me. My father actually blocked my path as I was exiting the stage. Julie, he said, his voice unfamiliar and weak. We didn't know. We didn't realize that I was valuable. I interrupted, ice in my voice. That I was worth paying attention to? My mother reached for my arm. Baby, we're your parents. We love you. We were just going through things back then. We didn't mean. You didn't mean what, Mom? I said, pulling away from her touch. To laugh when I had nowhere to sleep? To call me a disappointment? To tell me I wasn't built for success? You meant those things. You were just not expecting them to be weapons pointed at someone who would eventually become more successful than your sons who had every advantage. A woman nearby, I think she was the city council president, heard this exchange. She stepped toward my mother with visible disdain. Is this what you meant by your family abandoning you, Ms. Richardson? Because this moment right here is exactly why people cut their families off. My mother looked at her, then back at me, and for the first time I saw something that looked like genuine shame. We made mistakes, my father said quietly. Can we just talk privately? Please. I looked at them. These people I'd spent years running from, building against, proving something to, and I realized something pivotal. They weren't my responsibility anymore. Here's what's happening, I said calmly. You can leave now or you can stay and we can talk. But I need to be very clear. I'm not going to be the investment that saves your retirement. I'm not going to bail out Derek's failed business. I'm not going to fund anyone's lifestyle changes or wedding or business ventures. That time is gone. We just want to know our daughter, my mother whispered. Then get to know the woman I became, I said. But understand that woman doesn't owe you access to her empire. She only owes you basic human kindness, and right now I'm offering you the chance to have a real conversation. Not a transaction. A conversation. They agreed to meet the next day. I hung up one of my biggest walls that night, knowing that whatever happened in that conversation would define how I could move forward. We met at a coffee shop near my office. Neutral territory, limited time, lots of witnesses. I'd insisted on a specific location because I knew my emotions were unpredictable. My therapist, yes, I'd finally gotten a therapist in year 5 of my success, said this meeting could either be healing or re-traumatizing. Before we start, I said, sitting across from them, I need you to understand something. I'm not angry at you anymore. I'm past that. But I need you to finally understand what you did. My father started to speak, but I held up my hand. Let me speak first, I said. When Ryan stole from me and left, I didn't need financial support. I needed parents. I needed a family to tell me it wasn't my fault. Instead, I got judgment. I got abandoned. Do you know what that does to a person? Do you understand how that feels? My mother was crying silently. My father looked devastated, but I kept going. I lived in a homeless shelter, Mom and Dad. I cleaned bathrooms to earn meals. I slept on military cots with bedbugs. While you two were safe in your house, I was unsafe and afraid every single night. And you You knew I was gone and you didn't try to find me. When Keisha volunteered at the shelter, when she saw me, she didn't even pull me aside to ask if I was okay. She laughed about it. She was just a teenager. My mother started. She was 19. I cut her off. Old enough to know the difference between kindness and cruelty. And Derek? Derek made fun of me to his friends. Mocked me for having ambitions. When I asked for help, he laughed. My father's face was crumpling. We were dealing with our own issues. I know, I said sharply. Your business was struggling. Your marriage was strained. Your feelings were hurt about something. And instead of reaching out to your struggling daughter, you disappeared from her life. That's what you did. The silence after that statement was deafening. But here's what I need you to understand, I continued, and my voice was shaking now. I'm not that abandoned girl anymore. And the worst part? I don't need you to make amends. I don't need your apologies. What I needed was a family, and that's gone. You can't give that back to me. My mother sobbed then, real, gut-wrenching sobs. My father looked like he'd been physically struck. So what are we supposed to do? My father asked, and his voice was barely a whisper. You can choose to be better people going forward, I said. You can apologize genuinely, not because I'm successful now, but because you actually regret what you did. You can stay in my life on my terms, not yours. You can never again ask me for money or access or connections. And you can understand that rebuilding a relationship with me is possible, but trust is not. That's gone. My mother looked up at me with eyes that held years of regret. I'm so sorry, Julie. I'm so incredibly sorry. And I realized something in that moment. Her apology didn't fix anything. It didn't undo the nights I was cold and afraid. It didn't restore the years she was absent. An apology couldn't measure up to that cost. I know you are, I said quietly. And I accept it. But acceptance and forgiveness are different things, and I'm not there yet. Maybe I never will be. We parted that day with a tentative agreement to move forward. But something fundamental had shifted inside me. I finally understood that they could never be what I needed them to be. 6 months after that coffee shop meeting, something extraordinary happened. A woman named Jessica Harper came through the foundation's doors. Homeless, traumatized, and carrying all the markers of someone society had written off. She'd been a nurse before mental illness and addiction took her life apart. The team wanted to give her standard programming. But Jessica's intake counselor, a woman named Michelle who'd also been through homelessness, recommended her specifically for the accelerated tech training program I'd been developing. The program that took people with potential but no opportunities and gave them intensive hands-on coding education. Jessica was brilliant. Terrified but brilliant. Within 8 weeks, she'd mastered Python and was writing elegant code. Within 4 months, she had a job offer from a startup paying $85,000 annually. She moved into subsidized housing, enrolled her 2 kids back in school, and started rebuilding her life. I asked her to speak at a foundation fundraiser about her experience. She prepared remarks about second chances and what unconditional belief could do for a person. But when she got on the stage, something different happened. I want to tell you all something, Jessica said, her voice shaking. I want to tell you who this woman is, because I didn't understand her story until my counselor explained it to me. Jessica then told my entire story. She'd researched it, found the news articles, read the interviews. She told the audience about the girl who lived here in this building and used that pain to create a place where girls like me, and people like her, could escape. Julie Richardson didn't create this foundation to help the homeless, Jessica said, looking directly at me. She created it to resurrect herself by resurrecting us. And there's nothing wrong with that. Because in lifting us up, she's proven that nobody is disposable. Nobody. The audience was on their feet. People were crying. And I was having a panic attack. After the event, a woman approached me. She was young, maybe 35, wearing expensive clothes and an expression I recognized immediately. Wealth and entitlement. That was beautiful, she said. I'm Angela Morrison. I run a tech fund and I wanted to talk about investment opportunities and possibly, she paused, studying my face. Wait, Julie Richardson from Washington Heights? The one whose family? Oh no. Your father came to me about 6 months ago, Angela continued. He was trying to raise capital for some development project. He said his daughter was in tech and maybe I should invest with him as a way to connect. He didn't mention you were a billionaire. My stomach dropped. He actually took 10,000 of my money without delivering any business plan or returns, Angela said. Is he still scamming people? I felt the room tilt. My father had been using my name as a business credential while running what sounded like a Ponzi scheme. All this time, all these months of reconciliation, he'd been leveraging my success for his financial schemes. I'm going to need your contact information, I told Angela, my professional mask firmly in place while my insides were screaming. That night I called my father. For the first time since our coffee shop meeting, rage consumed me. You've been running a scam using my name? I asked quietly, which somehow sounded worse than yelling. Julie, it's not like that, he started. It's exactly like that, I cut him off. Angela Morrison was an innocent person who invested money based on your false claims and connections to me. You defrauded her. I was going to pay her back. When, Dad? With money from where? Are you planning to commit more fraud to cover the first fraud? The line went silent. Here's what's happening, I said. You're going to contact Angela Morrison, you're going to pay her back every single dollar with 20% interest, and you're going to confess to her and your lawyer that this was fraud. Then you're going to figure out if you want to go to prison or if you want to actually change. I can't pay her back, he said quietly. I don't have that kind of money. Then let me be absolutely clear. I will not be paying for your legal bills, your bail, or anything else related to this. You made this choice. You live with the consequences. Julie, please. You're my daughter. And you abandoned yours, I said. Now we're even. I hung up. The reconciliation, tentative as it was over. My father didn't go to prison. Angela agreed to a settlement rather than press charges. But he did suffer significant financial and reputational damage. Word spread through his business circles. He lost deals. People stopped taking his calls. And instead of taking responsibility, he blamed me. You didn't have to go public with this, he said during a phone call I should have ignored. You embarrassed our family. You embarrassed our family by being a fraud, I said. I just refused to be complicit in covering it up. But that's when Derek came through with something truly shocking. Derek had been struggling financially for years. His construction company had been hemorrhaging money, but he'd never told me directly. Instead, he'd borrowed heavily from loan sharks, the kind of loans that come with serious consequences. He owed $800,000, and the people he owed it to were not the type to accept payment plans. Derek came to my office personally. I hadn't seen him in person in over 5 years. He was thinner, older, broken in a way that even I could recognize because I'd been there. I need help, he said bluntly. I know, I replied. I heard through the family. Will you help me? I studied my brother carefully. Derek had mocked me when I was homeless. He'd laughed about my struggles. He'd never once reached out during my worst years. And now he was here asking for salvation. Why should I? I asked coldly. Because I'm family, he said. You were family when I needed you too, I answered. You just chose cruelty instead. Derek flinched. I was young. I was stupid. I didn't understand what you were going through. You understood perfectly, I said. You just didn't care. And the reason you're here now is because nobody else will help you. Not because you've changed. Not because you feel genuine remorse. You're here because you've exhausted every other option. That's not true, Derek protested, but his voice wavered. It's completely true, I said. If you weren't desperate, you wouldn't be in my office. You wouldn't have suddenly remembered I existed. Derek was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that actually broke through my anger. You're right. I'm ashamed. I'm terrified. I'm losing everything and I don't know how to fix it. And the person who would understand how that feels is the sister I treated like garbage. It was the first honest thing I'd heard from any of my family members. I made a decision in that moment that my therapist would later call setting a boundary disguised as compassion. I'm not going to give you $800,000, I said. But I'm going to do something different. I'm going to connect you with the Foundation's financial recovery program. We work with people who've made terrible decisions to understand why and to build legitimate financial futures. If you're willing to do actual work, therapy, financial literacy, honest self-examination, then you might find your way out. But you'll do it through your own effort, not my money. That's not enough, Derek said desperately. These people will kill me if I don't pay. Then you need to go to law enforcement, I said. You need to make a choice about what kind of person you want to be. But I won't enable you by throwing money at a problem that requires character development. Derek left my office defeated. I didn't know if he'd take my advice. I didn't know if he'd survive his circumstances. And I realized that was finally okay with me. I couldn't save people who didn't want to save themselves, and I was exhausted from trying. The story of my estrangement from my family eventually leaked to the media. A journalist somehow got access to details about my past homelessness, my family's abandonment, and my subsequent success. The resulting article was titled, "From Homeless to Billionaire: How One Woman's Family Rejected Her Before She Became Legendary." It went viral. My phone exploded with calls from family members I hadn't heard from in decades. My mother's cousin reached out asking if I could help her daughter get into tech. A cousin's husband wanted investment capital for a restaurant. My father's former business partner called asking if I'd fund a commercial real estate project, out of respect for my family legacy. Everyone suddenly needed something from me. Everyone suddenly was so proud of my accomplishments. The media attention created an unexpected consequence. It made me a symbol. People started comparing me to other billionaires with difficult family stories. I became the cautionary tale about what happens when you forget where you came from. And then I became the inspiration for people who felt abandoned by their families. The foundation received donations from across the country, people who'd read my story and wanted to help others escape the same circumstances. We doubled our programming. We opened 3 additional facilities in other cities. We helped nearly 10,000 people in a single year. But success came with complicated emotions. The more famous I became, the more my family tried to leverage that fame. Keisha hired a PR firm to rebrand her image as supportive sister to tech billionaire. My mother started accepting invitations to charity galas under my name. My father tried to start a business consulting firm claiming to have helped me build my empire. He absolutely did not. I had to issue a public statement denying any business relationship with my father. I had to send cease and desist letters regarding my mother's use of my name. I had to hire security because family members kept showing up at my office uninvited. The worst moment came when a reporter asked me on camera if I still spoke to my family. No, I said simply. I chose not to maintain those relationships. That statement became a headline: "Billionaire cuts off all family ties." And then something unexpected happened. Derek disappeared. My father called me in a panic. Derek had entered the foundation's financial recovery program 3 months earlier, doing genuine work on himself. He'd been making real progress: therapy, honest self-assessment, practical life skills. But then he'd stopped showing up. Nobody knew where he was. I hired a private investigator. The report came back within a week. Derek had run. He'd taken out a loan under false pretenses, purchased a plane ticket to Mexico, and left with just the clothes on his back. He'd left a note for my mother saying he couldn't face the shame anymore, that he was going to disappear and start over somewhere new. He was gone. And I realized something terrible. I hadn't prayed for his success. I hadn't been willing him to heal. I'd been waiting for him to fail, prove my point, validate my bitterness. And in some way my coldness might have accelerated his decision to flee. I wasn't the villain in my story, but I wasn't purely the hero either. 2 years later, I received a letter from Derek. He was in Guatemala working for a non-profit helping at-risk youth. He'd completely rebuilt his identity. He wasn't running a business or seeking success in the traditional sense anymore. He was doing meaningful work that paid barely enough to survive, but apparently gave him purpose. The letter was 7 pages long. He apologized, genuinely, painfully, exhaustively. He didn't ask for money or forgiveness. He didn't even ask to reconnect. He just wanted me to know that he understood what he'd done. That he'd spent years understanding it. and that watching me succeed had actually been his wake-up call, not his motivation to scam or scheme, but his motivation to stop being the kind of person who would mock someone's struggle. I read about you constantly, he wrote. Every article, every interview, every mention. And instead of being happy for you, I was bitter. That bitterness ate me alive, Julie. Made me a person I hated. When I ran to Guatemala, I wasn't running from debt collectors. I was running from myself. He included a photo. Derek looked completely different. Healthier, happier, younger somehow despite the years. He was standing with a group of teenagers, all smiling at the camera. The caption read, "Teaching entrepreneurship to kids who have nothing but potential." I cried reading that letter. Not because it fixed what he'd done, but because it proved that change was possible. That even people who'd hurt me could eventually become people worth knowing. I didn't write back immediately. But I did something. I donated $200,000 to the nonprofit Derek worked for, anonymously. I made sure he'd never know it came from me because this wasn't about reconciliation or redemption anymore. This was about supporting the work itself, supporting the kids he was helping, supporting the person he'd become. Meanwhile, my father's health was declining. He'd suffered a heart attack 6 months after the fraud scandal, and he'd never fully recovered. My mother called me regularly, not asking for money anymore but giving updates. He was taking medications. He was in therapy. He was finally trying to understand the harm he'd caused. I visited him once. Just once. He was sitting in a hospital room attached to various monitors, and he looked at me with eyes that held genuine remorse. "I wasted so much," he said quietly. "I wasted your potential by not believing in it. I wasted my relationships by being selfish. I wasted years of my life being angry at people who were succeeding while I wasn't." "Yes," I said. "You did." I didn't offer comfort. I didn't say it would be okay. I just sat there and let him sit with what he'd done. "Will you ever forgive me?" he asked. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "That's the truth I can give you. I don't know if forgiveness is possible, and I don't think you deserve it yet. But I'm open to the possibility. That's as much as I have." He nodded, accepting what I could offer without demanding more. This is where I tell you something that's going to sound contradictory, and I need you to sit with that contradiction because it's the most important truth I've learned. I've built $1 billion empire. I've created a foundation that's transformed thousands of lives. I've become someone my younger self could never have imagined. And I've done all of it without my family's belief, without their support, without their acknowledgement or their love. And that's both the greatest achievement and the saddest outcome of my entire life. Because the truth is, I wanted them to believe in me. Not because I needed their money or their connections, but because they were my family. And there's something primal about wanting your family to see you, value you, invest in you. My mother recently asked me if I'm happy. And I had to tell her the truth. I'm successful, I'm powerful, I'm admired and respected. But I'm not happy about the family I lost in the process of proving myself. Success didn't heal the wound of abandonment. It just covered it up with achievements and accolades. And now that I have everything I fought for, I realize that the thing I wanted most, unconditional family love, is the one thing that can't be purchased or earned or demanded back into existence. My parents are still alive, but our relationship is cordial at best. My mother calls on holidays. My father sends emails occasionally. We don't pretend we're close. We acknowledge what happened and move forward without the fantasy that family obligation means love. Derek is still in Guatemala. He sends letters occasionally. I send donations to his nonprofit occasionally. We're not brothers and sister anymore, but we're something. People who hurt each other and found some way to continue existing in the same world without that hurt consuming everything. Keisha got married last year. I didn't attend the wedding. She didn't ask me to. We follow each other on social media and occasionally like posts, which is a pathetic version of sisterhood but better than active hostility. And Ryan tried to reconnect recently through a mutual friend. I blocked him on all platforms without responding. Here's what I want you to understand: if you're watching this and your family has abandoned you, betrayed you, or failed you in some fundamental way, your success will never be enough to make them regret what they did. Their regret, when it comes, won't fix what was broken. And waiting for their redemption or their recognition will keep you trapped in the past. The real victory isn't becoming richer than them or more successful than them or more powerful than them. The real victory is building a life so intentional, so purposeful, and so grounded in your own values that their absence stops hurting. I'm funding that homeless shelter not as revenge against my family. I'm funding it as gratitude to the version of me who survived when nobody believed I would. I'm funding it because there are thousands of people right now living in the exact circumstances I did, and they deserve to know that their current circumstances don't determine their future. That's not a lesson I needed my family to teach me. That's a lesson I learned from surviving without them. Would I change my past if I could? Honestly, I don't know. Because the pain that forced me to build something extraordinary, that pain is also the thing that broke me in ways I'm still healing from. And I don't know if I'd trade one for the other. What I know is this: I'm grateful. Grateful for Mrs. Anderson who believed in me. Grateful for Robert Greene who taught me. Grateful for everyone who saw my potential when my own family couldn't. And grateful for the struggle even though I wouldn't wish it on anyone. To anyone reading this who's been abandoned, dismissed, or forgotten by the people who should have loved you, you don't have to become a billionaire to be worthy. You already are. But if you do build something extraordinary, and I believe many of you will, make sure you're building it for yourself, not against them. That's the difference between success and freedom. I'm finally free. Not because my family came around. Not because they finally see my worth. Free because I stopped asking them to give me what only I could give myself. And that freedom, that's more valuable than any amount of money. If you've read this far, you understand. The real happy ending isn't about winning. It's about choosing yourself. Comment your version of that choice below. And if you're struggling right now, homeless, abandoned, afraid, please reach out to a local shelter or organization. Resources and hope exist. You're not alone in this. If this story resonated, please share it. Someone in your life needs to know they're not alone either.